Our meeting is called to order. First agenda item is subdivision approval not required plans. The first application is for 176 Hale Street, map 199, lot 22. The applicant is A&A Properties, LLC.
Testing. Am I good?
Sounds good.
So this is a pretty straightforward A&R. We're just simply taking a lot and making two parcels out of it. The parcel that has the existing house in it, 176, sort of remains conforming in the R10 district. We're creating a large parcel in the backyard, which will probably be sold to one of the neighboring landowners.
Can you give us a chance to open these up?
Sorry.
Do you know what you're talking about? Can you walk us through what's happening here or what is proposed?
So behind the garage on the property, we're creating a new line that separates Lot 1 from Lot 2. Lot 1 is the 16,000 square foot parcel near Hale Street. Lot 2 is just a 54,000 square foot parcel with no frontage, and so it's labeled as not a building lot. So it's that Lot 2 that I suspect will end up being sold to a neighboring property owner, although that's not absolutely certain. And Lot 1 remains the house, or the lot with the residence on it, and remains in the R10 district and remains a building lot, and that lot is going to be sold.
Questions for Mr. Griffin?
He wants to sell his land to two different property owners.
So he's just taking what was an approximately 70,000 square foot parcel and subdividing it into the 54,970, and then the other one, or the remaining parcel, will be the 464?
Exactly.
Okay. And what's the zoning?
R10.
R10? Thank you. No change in the frontage?
Correct.
Are there any other questions? This seems to meet all of the requirements. Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd welcome a motion on this. What?
I'll move to approve the subdivision approval not required for 176 Hale Street and A&A Properties Incorporated, LLC.
Is there a second on the motion? Seconded by Ms. Kilcoyne. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Second A&R plan is 722, 724, 726, and 726A Hale Street. Map 37, lots 91 through 92. 81X certificate confirming the plan has not changed.
I'm Rusty Brown. I'm the manager of ZMB Realty and the owner of the property at 726 Hale Street. ZMB Realty owns 722 Hale Street. I was before this board about a year ago with an A&R plan which was signed, and I needed it for the permit from the building inspector's office at that time, and I forgot to record it. And so I just forgot about the plan. So more than 6 months having been transpired, I do need to record it. I need to draw a deed and actually convey the parcel from ZMB over to my individual name. It's a 1,000 square foot piece of property that I'm conveying from ZMB over to into the name of, to 726 Hale Street, which I own in the name of myself and my wife. So I'm essentially just moving 1,000 square feet.
So just to explain, the planning board already endorsed this subdivision. He's provided the actual plan that Chairperson Hutchinson signed to affirm that it's the same plan and nothing has changed. So because the registry requires you to record things within 6 months, he needs us, the board, to certify that it hasn't changed. And the chairperson would sign a form that he would then take and record with the existing plan. So it's literally the same plan.
Okay, just so you, so there's one copy of the plan here, and here it is, and this is the plan that we approved on or around October 16th of 2018. It's signed by me, and the gentleman is here looking for us to certify that the plan has not changed. The gentleman simply failed to record it within the time frame. And the planning department is satisfied that the plan hasn't changed?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'd welcome a motion. Well, first, let me ask, are there any questions?
Yes. Yes.
Good question, though. Okay, so I'd welcome a motion on this.
I move that we certify this plan as unchanged, as requested by the applicant.
We have a motion, it was seconded by, I'm totally blanking on your name.
Paul Goddard.
Wayne, I'm sorry, Wayne. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. The next agenda item is number 2, OSRD. Do we have any more? I'm sorry. Anything else?
No.
Okay. OSRD number 10-17, definitive subdivision plan for 20, 30, and 40 Webster Avenue. Request to release lots 1 and 2 from covenant and waive from the board's conditions. The applicant is Benco LLC, who my understanding is the owner, is now the owner of lots 1 and 2. Has always been the owner, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak for Benco LLC?
He was not sure that.
Okay. Well, there's no one here to ask questions, and my first question is one of standing as to whether this gentleman or this company, Benco LLC, still has or has standing to request a release from the covenants. And I don't know the answer to that question. Can you remind us?
So Benco LLC was the original developer, or the applicant who submitted the project for approvals, which involved 2 parcels that contained existing multifamily homes, multifamily structures, one that's accessed from Webster, one that is accessed off the driveway, and then an additional 9 units that were being constructed. New units would be constructed at the end of the driveway. So then Mr. Carlson sold the property to a different developer, but retained the multifamily units one of which takes access off the proposed new subdivision roadway. It's an existing structure that is connected to, has remained occupied throughout the whole time. It is connected to utilities already through Webster, but it needs access, and its residents take access through the roadway that is currently under construction. And they have continued to do so throughout the construction because we did not allow them to have the alternative of using the cart path. So is there more? And the roadway construction is ongoing, so. I think we did this recently with us in a similar project, but different circumstances related to the 875 Hale Street project, where there was one house that was an existing house that was being renovated, ironically was being sold to Mr. Carlson. But it was on Hale Street already, and it was completely separate from the subdivision. It had its own access. It was not dependent on the subdivision roadway. So you, at that time, granted a waiver it released it from the covenant, but the applicant, the builder, was also releasing the other lots from the covenant and putting a performance bond in place at that time. So that's a unique difference to the situation. And you granted relief from some of the waivers because they didn't apply to that singular parcel that was outside of the development area. There were no conditions. It was a temporary and, partial relief because the developer wanted to sell off that one lot before doing the rest of the subdivision. Kind of done that a couple times. Did it at Sunnycrest as well.
Darlene is talking about the other recent case in which we did a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
So is to the chair's question about who is asking for relief now versus who the applicant was? What's the story there?
So the person asking for relief now is the person who was granted the approval,
Okay.
but not the current owner of the subdivision, the new subdivision, and not the person responsible for building the roadway.
Does
So
that matter?
Wouldn't the conditions and the covenant travel would be?
The covenant is, I have that, and that's a good question. The covenant was enacted by the person currently seeking release, but the covenant transfers with the sale of the property.
My question is, the wording says from covenant and away from board's conditions, were there any? And do they apply? What conditions?
So the conditions are tied to, there's a document that I have that looks like this. So you have. It doesn't state the conditions in it, but I can reference them to you if you want. I can pull them out.
Can I interrupt for just a second? I wonder if it makes more sense to table this until the applicant can make this meeting and perhaps answer these questions for himself instead of us having to weed our way trying to figure out what his obligations are and that sort of thing. Board members, other thoughts? If it's important to him, he ought to be here, and he ought to be here presenting his request to this board.
Did you indicate that Ms. Gooding could address that, Darlene? No. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I move that we table this matter to our next meeting.
And ask Mr. Carlson or his representative to be here. Is there that's a motion, seconded by Derek?
Which meetings you want, the 13th or the 19th?
The next meeting, so that's the 13th. Seconded by Ms. Flannery. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed, motion passes. This matter is tabled to our November 13th meeting. Okay, let's jump ahead, folks, to number 6. Agenda item 6A is set a public hearing for site plan review number 146-19, construct a mixed-use building in the CN zoning district containing 825 square feet of retail space on the first floor and 3 residential units on the second and third floors, together with 9 on-site parking spaces. The property location is 0 Everett Street, and the applicant is 0 Everett Street LLC.
So I wanted to give some context as what we have already scheduled for our upcoming meetings, if that's okay?
Please.
So we have, if you all recall, we added a meeting, which is actually Wednesday, November 13th, and have scheduled for that meeting the last item that we just addressed, a public hearing for 107 Dodge Street, a public hearing for 5 West Dane Street, and a public hearing for 7 Porter Terrace. And then after that, we have a meeting on the 19th, and haven't set anything for that, but I have some ideas about how we will schedule these meetings. I think, where's my current agenda? I think if we're talking about ones, I think number C would appreciate being on the 13th. I'm not sure the others have a preference. Number C, or letter C. All of them would prefer sooner than later, I'm sure. Yeah. But 6 days.
Do we have any room at all on the 13th, given what I
think we're going to have to put some on each. If we accept the motion, if the board accepts the motion to continue
True.
Depot 2, I was proposing that would go on the 19th. And so therefore, that wouldn't leave much room. You could do a couple that night and a couple on a couple more on the 13th.
Okay. I move that we schedule a public hearing for site plan review number 146-19 for our November 19th meeting.
There's a motion before the board. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Flannery. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
I move,
Site plan review comes before a building permit. Yes.
Okay, so that public hearing has been set for the 19th, November 19th.
I move that we also schedule item 6B on the agenda, the waiver of frontage and definitive subdivision plan, Livingston Avenue, 21 Porter Terrace, Jeffrey Halloran, for the November 19th meeting.
I'm sorry, this is not a public hearing, so I'm sorry, I can't take comments nor questions from the audience. I'm sorry, there's a motion before the board to have that on for the 19th. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Ma'am, the 13th, I presume you're with the Porter Terrace applicant? The agenda on the 13th is already incredibly heavy, so we're trying to balance the needs of applicants such as yourself frankly, with the needs of board members to have meetings that aren't unduly long. We've been consistently going to 11:30 and midnight, and it's just too long. So unfortunately, some of these meetings have to be pushed off until the next meeting. There's only a six-day difference between the meeting on the 13th and the meeting on the 19th. So I hope you don't mind, and I apologize if you do, but that meeting has been, or that public hearing is scheduled for the 19th. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is number C, public hearing modification to approved Smart Growth Overlay District Application 01-18. The property location is 108 Sawyer Road, and the applicant is Harborlight Community Partners Incorporated.
Ellen, I'd like to set the public hearing for application number 01-18 for the modification to approve Smart Growth Overlay District for November 13th.
Motion, is there a second on the motion? Seconded by Mr. Besh. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion passes. That public hearing is set for the 13th. Please.
Just to clarify on that agenda item, it's supposed to say 2 units, not 3 units, so just for the
Okay.
record.
2 units.
2 units, not 3 units.
Not 3 units. Okay, we have about 3 minutes before we have to recess for public hearing. Is there any other new or additional business?
I was going to allow some time to talk about the master plan, but I was going to save it for the other anticipated break of time potentially, but I'm not sure.
Anything else? We have no minutes?
You already asked me that, no.
All right. We'll just, so just so the audience knows, we have set a time for the public hearing, and that time is 7:30, so we have to wait till 7:30 to commence that public hearing. And according to that clock over there, it looks like it's about 2 or 3 minutes away, so we've taken care of all of our other business. Not in 2 or 3 minutes. I think she'd like to spend some time. So we're just going to wait, looks like another 2 minutes or a minute or so, and then we will recess for public hearing. The planning department has asked BevCam to film tonight's meeting, so I hope you all look your best, because you're being taped for this evening. And we want to thank BevCam for being here and agreeing to tape the meeting.
Anybody else want to sign the certificate? Ellen is allowed to sign on all your behalf, but if you all want to sign.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Just for further information as to recordation, we've just been informed that the Salem News is also recording this meeting. Okay, can I have a motion to recess for public hearing, please? Moved by Mr. Besh, seconded by Mr. Beckwith. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. We're now in public hearing. Our first public hearing is the continued public hearing, site plan review number 140-19, special permit number 172-19, and inclusionary housing permit number 17-19, Depot 2, a mixed commercial and residential building containing 115 residential units, though that's been amended, with associated parking and site improvements, 134 to 142, 146 Rantoul Street, and 1-9 Park Street. The applicant is Depot Square Phase 2 LLC.
Good evening, members of the board. Miranda Gooding from Glovsky & Glovsky on behalf of the applicant. As I believe board members are aware, we submitted a request earlier today with apologies to the board and members of the public. Our traffic consultant, Rebecca Brown, who had anticipated presenting this evening, had a family illness today and is not able to present. And that was sort of the last major component of our affirmative presentation, if you will. And under the circumstances, I think out of respect for the board's time, as much as anything, we thought it would make sense to request the continuance to your next hearing so that public comment and board question can then address the remaining items as well as whatever has been previously discussed together. So it would be our request to continue in the entirety this evening.
I want to make sure that audience members understand what the request is. Sometimes real life gets in the way, and Ms. Brown has had a family emergency and can't be here with us tonight. What was scheduled for tonight was supposed to be a parking and traffic discussion, so having the traffic engineer or the traffic expert here to present obviously was critical. So she obviously can't be here, and so the applicant has requested a continuance to our next meeting. I think we're inclined to go to the 19th. We could not tell you ahead of time that this hearing would be continued because we have no way of knowing, I have no way of knowing if the board will grant the continuance or not. So that's why there was no advance notice. There can't be any advance notice in a situation like this about a continuance because you don't know, I don't know, we don't know. Planning department doesn't know if the continuance will be granted. Said, what is the wish of the board?
Should we respect of the public's attendance here if there's anyone who is unable to come on the 19th and wants to make a comment that's not about parking and traffic? Could we welcome that, or should we delay as well?
Well, given the fact that our next public hearing isn't scheduled to 8:30, we're going to have this time period of about an hour. So I think, my opinion is that it makes sense, if people cannot be here on what I think will be the 19th, then we allow them to come forward and offer comments at this time. Other board members' thoughts? We can't, let me just make sure that everybody on the board understands, we can't start our next public hearing until 8:30 because we specified a time. So we would, in essence, be sitting here for an hour waiting for the next public hearing to start. It seems to me that if there are audience members who wish to offer comment at this point because they can't be here on either the 13th or the 19th, then it makes sense to do so. Ms. Gooding?
Madam Chair, I just have a question regarding procedure for my own benefit. I was under the impression, and I know that on previous occasions when the board had set sort of agenda times, the board reserved the right to start earlier because those were not, in fact, noticed times. They weren't in the legal notice as, these are all continued hearings, and the legal notice was originally noticed several months ago now for these. Am I mistaken in that? Only, I just need the clarity for going forward.
I would say this, that where we have specified a time for both hearings, that it seems to me, whether or not it's legally mandated or not, that as a courtesy to the audience and as a courtesy to frankly, to board members, that we shouldn't start the second hearing until this stated time, which is 8:30.
Thank you.
Wish of the board with respect to having members of the public.
One comment, I know that the last time we heard this, we hadn't had a chance to ask questions yet. We did avail ourselves of that opportunity the last month, which meant that the public didn't have the opportunity. I know there were a few people who were eager to speak that didn't have the opportunity to last month. So for my part, I think I'd be in favor of giving them the opportunity since we have the time.
They haven't presented yet.
So it'd be open to any discussion on this.
I agree. The only thing I would add is I think the chair has previously suggested to audience members that if they've spoken before, we don't need to hear the same arguments again. Everything that's been submitted and said at the previous hearings is part of what we've already got under consideration, so we don't need to hear it again. But I agree that certainly people who have come tonight and haven't spoken yet, and particularly if they can't be here conveniently on the 19th, should have an opportunity.
One more question, Madam Chair. If public comment is to be had, there are a few items that changed, which are included in your packet. Does it make sense for us to present those quickly? They are not parking and traffic related. At the board's pleasure.
Sure.
Thank you.
We're actually we're going on with the public hearing.
But you need to actually take a vote?
I think we do, because they've requested a continuance, so we need to act on it.
I move that we respectfully deny the request for continuance with the understanding that we will indeed hear the parking and traffic presentation and have opportunity to fully question on that at a later meeting, I believe the November 19th, but that we'll use the hour or so that's available to us tonight to hear from members of the public as previously discussed.
There's a motion before us. Is there a second on the motion? Seconded by Ms. Flannery. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Well, while Thad loads the presentation, then I will go ahead and just present the updated information for the benefit of the board. Since the October 1st meeting, as members are aware, the Design Review Board issued a recommendation a favorable recommendation to the Planning Board, including a finding that the project design demonstrated substantial compliance with the tall building guidelines, as well as a recommendation to approve the design with conditions that the applicant appear back before the Design Review Board with respect to, with further details with respect to the exterior plaza design materials, as well as the materials on the upper stories of the proposed building. But we do have a final DRB recommendation at this time. And as a result, we now have all board findings and recommendations that are required as part of site plan review. And the applicant respectfully submits that they will agree to all of the conditions that are made part of those decisions and part of the record. Beverly Crossing has considered carefully the questions and comments from members of the board, as well as the public, and would like to offer some modifications to the proposed project for your consideration this evening. The first of which involves the affordable housing. As members are aware, the current requirement is that 8% of the proposed 111 units, or 9 units altogether, be restricted either by on-site, and we are proposing to do that by credit units. Those 9 units are restricted to 60% AMI. As a reminder, those 9 units are 6 new 2-bedroom units at 2 Hardy Street and 6 units at 461 Rantoul Street, which is a renovation. Those are all 3-bedroom units. The units at Hardy Street are proposed deep affordability levels. The units at 461 Rantoul Street, of which we had proposed to use 3, were restricted to 60% AMI. After consultation and review of the concerns with respect to this matter, Beverly Crossing would like to, in essence, relinquish the remaining credit units for that building, of which there are 3, 1 at 60% and 2 at 80%, and apply them to this project. So instead of 9 units, the city will, in fact, log 12 units of affordable housing in accordance with this project. So that, the combination, we believe, of the greater mix of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms that this project, these off-site units actually allow us to provide, as well as the deeper levels of affordability and now the increased number of affordable units, all we hope the board will find acceptable and approve the inclusionary housing application, which we are now exceeded compliance with in several really considerable respects. The other modifications, I'm going to let Thad run through. There's one design modification, and the other is more in the nature of a supplement. We have some information regarding the sustainability of the project that it made sense to present as well in response to board member questions.
Good evening. Good evening, Thad Samasco and Verberidge Architects. We heard from some public input regarding the corner of Railroad Avenue and Park Street, and was there a way to make that more pedestrian friendly? And what we have done, if you see on the lower right, we had come back and we had put a door in that bottom right panel so that you could get into the building off of Railroad Avenue right at that corner, and then go up some stairway into the main space above. But actually, there is an opportunity. I think Ms. Pearl mentioned, well, can you run that storefront, up completely up Railroad Avenue? Well, we really can't, but we could add 2 more bays of glass, as you can see to the left of the doorway. So now we have essentially a lower level 600 square foot space at the grade level of Railroad Avenue and Park on that corner. And as you go around the corner to Park Street, we're able to add a couple panels of glass around that corner. So there now will be a storefront of sorts at sidewalk elevation down at the corner of Park and Rantoul. There's an opportunity for that to either be a separate 600 square foot space, or it could connect up and be sort of a 1.25 story height space that connects up with a lift and a stairway to the major space that you see in the darker orange on the lower left. To do that, we lost a parking space, but we always have one in our hip pocket because something always seems to happen. There's a need for some equipment or something that might take out a space. So we're going to use our extra space, if you will, to allow us to have this larger commercial space at the lower level. Because it's sort of cutting out the floor of the space above, we're not adding actual square footage of commercial space, we're just putting it down at that grade level. So we'll have a more attractive corner, much more of a storefront on the corner of Park and Rantoul Street, as you see in the rendering on the lower right. So we think that's an improvement to the pedestrian quality of the project on that corner. Second thing that Miranda mentioned was the handout that you all received for sustainable design features, which is 6 or 7 pages. I won't go into it in great detail other than to say we took the LEED design standards and applied them to this project to see how we would fare if we were to seek certification. And in fact, we would be LEED certifiable. The exact level of certification we would gain has to depend on energy modeling and other things that you can't really prove out yet at this point in the project, but at a minimum would have at some base level LEED certification. If you're not familiar with the standards, there's 6 major categories they look at. The first one relates to mostly where the building is. As many of you may know, like Manhattan is considered one of the greenest parts of the country because of the density. And so it's generally considered very green to be in a place where the site has already been developed, to be near transportation, to be walking distance, to have bike amenities, to be away from natural resource areas. And all of those are things that this project has. So we score very, very high on the location and transportation category. The site sustainable features are things like if you can have your parking under the building rather than have more asphalt, that's better. We score well on that, of course. The white roofs are in that category. And things like not having lighting, night sky compliant lighting, which is incorporated in the project. So that's in that category. Water efficiency is fairly self-evident, but one thing we do is individually water meter the units, which helps to reduce consumption, human nature being what it is. Also things like, I noticed bullet point 3 should say natives. We use native species and not a lot of grass in order to conserve water. The energy and atmosphere section is a lot to do with energy efficiency of the equipment, also sub-metering electrical, which we do, and doing some energy simulation modeling and so forth along the way to prove out the energy consumption of the building. So that's incorporated. We do well in that category as well. Materials and resources is about construction waste management using FSC lumber, trying to do as much locally sourced materials and natural materials as you can use, which of course we're dedicated to. The last, indoor environmental quality, is really to do with mostly with fresh air being introduced into the units, low VOC paints, those kinds of things are included. Having a no smoking policy for a building, for example, is in that category, which again we just score points on. So in conclusion, when we're done, we would be LEED certifiable, which indicates a really high level of environmental sustainability, but also we have the composting collection, the traffic demand management program, which Rebecca will hopefully present next time, or incorporate in the design. It's likely this will be an Energy Star rated facility as well. So I know that we hadn't focused on these particular items in our presentation, so we thought we'd get them all combined and put in one place for your information. You want to go to the next?
So the last slide here is just an answer to a specific question that one of the members raised during the last public hearing, and which we were asked to address again by the planning department. And that had to do with an explanation of housing costs for the Beverly Crossing projects, buildings on Rantoul Street, in relation to sort of the benchmark for what housing costs should be, ideally, which is 30% of a household's income. So here, the slide tracks some figures for you. Beverly median income estimated in 2019 dollars is approximately $80,000. The next figure is the average reported income of tenants of Beverly Crossing buildings, the four that you see there: Enterprise, Burnham, 131, Rantoul, and Link 480, all of which are up and running now. And I think, I can't read there, there's about 246 apartments and about 345 residents that this samples. The average reported income of those individuals is $112,000, so considerably above the Beverly median income. And that translates to, and when you take into account the average market rent of about $2,018 a month, again, averaged over those four properties, that brings the ratio of housing expenses based on median area income in Beverly to just 30%. But if in fact you look at the income of the residents who are actually living there, our ratio is well below that at 22%. We've also trended, provided some very loose projections, because this is looking out to 2022, of what the rents would be at the Depot 2 project specifically. And the bottom line is that the percentages mirror what you see, what we just went through above. So it will end up being, on average, about 30% of the median income of all Beverly residents, and about 22% of the income of residents actually sampled in these buildings. And that would conclude the information that we have to update the board, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Derek, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for providing the numbers. And I appreciate you doing the analysis on the other four properties that you have. And that's good information to have. However, as I remember, the question is, maybe I didn't phrase it right. I'm concerned not necessarily with the residents who are existing tenants in your building. I'm concerned about the impact overall in what has traditionally been an area where moderate income folks can afford to live, and that is between Rantoul and Cabot. And the impact, not that or how Depot 2 will juxtapose against the income levels and affordability for those people to be able to live in this new building, which would be, if approved, in the area. So that was really the question. It comes, I guess, to a larger one, and I'm not putting the onus on you to solve that problem at all, but it's a question of, can working families afford to live in what we are approving in the way this particular development and others are impacting? I'm very curious and concerned to see whether or not we can get maybe better information about the incomes in those particular areas or parts of the wards there, to be able to get more insight as to what impact it's going to have on what is the traditional urban fabric of this area that's abutting your project.
You're supposing that it would be higher or lower than the income on the census for the city as a whole?
The facts will be the facts, but my feeling is that the median income of 80,000 for the streets, and I can't remember the street names now, driving through that area with many multifamily units, et cetera, and a lot of, smaller residential units, similar to where, when I first moved to Beverly, where I was able to afford to live, and it wasn't right within this, but it was on Pickett Street, right off of Cabot Street.
Right, but I'm
And
just...
so my guess is that it would be lower than the overall, which is averaging to include, the affluent areas of the city.
Well, right. I think that's speculation, but you may be right. I actually had a different question about the average for the 4 buildings. In 2-bedroom units where there is more than one resident,
Yes.
is it a per person average, or are we combining the incomes of all the residents per unit?
They're on the lease, that we understand their employment, we understand their reported income.
Okay, but that's not my question. My question is, when you're averaging, are you taking the per apartment income or the per person income?
Oh, per person.
Okay, so 2 people living together in a 2-bedroom apartment, they're each making $112,000. They're not combining to make $112,000.
That's a composite average of everybody who reports an income to us and everybody who's on the lease for 345 residents. That's what it averages to.
Okay.
So it's
Per person, not per apartment.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what they report. That includes all the affordable units too, all the affordable units that we have.
I wasn't making a supposition either way. I just wanted to be clear on it.
Excuse me, ma'am, you can't, ma'am, there's no responding directly to the gentleman. Thank you. Other questions? Wayne, you had questions about the leads?
I guess I'd like to address my questions to whomever on your staff is LEED accredited. Who would that be? Your LEED accreditation. I'm just going to read from your document that you gave us. The most widely recognized standards regarding sustainability practices for mid-rise multifamily buildings of this type are the LEED version 4 for homes, LEED version 4 for building design and construction. The LEED standards are organized in 6 different categories covering a wide range of sustainable practices. This document is an outline of the Depot 2 project's conformance with the standards. A LEED, as we know, I guess, stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's a certification process. LEED has established prerequisites, which you referred to, and also it's a rating strategy of design features which inform a point system. There are 3 levels of certification, resulting in the award of one of these certifications, either silver, gold, or platinum. And you've commented that the document is an outline of the Depot 2 project's conformance with the standards. Do you, in fact, plan to seek LEED certification? You do not. This is a document, an outline of the Depot 2's project conformance with the standards, but you don't intend to apply for certification. Is that correct?
That's right. I think it's pretty common practice because of the cost and onerousness, for lack of a better term, of doing the LEED actual process, that folks tend to take the dollars that go into that certification and put them into the building in terms of its sustainability practices. We've done that with multiple institutions. So we tell folks that if we went through the process, it would be a LEED certifiable project. we look at the point system, what this outline is looking through and say, we'd get points for that, we get points for that, we get points for that. But it's fairly rare for private developers to be seeking lead credits right now because, frankly, meeting the code and then doing this much more that we're showing here makes you lead certifiable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, in fact, Beverly Crossing Flats at 131 Enterprise, Burnham 50 Broadway, McKay, and Lake 480, none have applied for lead certification, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This statement that the document is an outline of the Depot 2 project's conformance with the standards, I found a bit confusing. And just one more quick clarification. In your comments, you note that the project is designed to include on-site renewable solar energy panels at the roof level. In fact, there are no solar energy panels incorporated in the plan, correct?
We put solar panels on every single project that we've done. I probably have never shown solar panels on a project because we don't know exactly where they're going until all the mechanicals are done. I think we've committed to doing solar panels through this public hearing process on the buildings.
Great, that's excellent. I just was clarifying that comment that the project is designed to include on-site, so.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from members of the board? Okay, I would invite members of the public who have not spoken about this project. Sure, if we have a sign sheet. So what I would ask, again, we have about half an hour to hear comments. Again, as Mr. Besh indicated earlier, we would ask that those who have not had an opportunity to speak about this be given the first opportunity to speak tonight. And again, to the extent that you have new information, new commentary, that would be welcome. I think we have a sign-up sheet, so we'll take it from there.
Madam Chair? And before we do that, do we have a copy of this presentation that's been given this evening? And I realize it's short. Oh, great.
Not yet, but they usually submit it the next day, or I take it off the laptop.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, the first person on the list is a Paul A. Is it Schultz? Schutt? Pass? Okay, thank you. Karen Schwartz?
I'll be brief. Thank you so much for denying.
I'm sorry, ma'am, your name and address, please?
I'm sorry, Karen Schwartz, 19 Giles Ave, and I work at 7 Thorndike Street behind TD Bank and across the street from City Hall. Thank you so much for denying the continuance. I'm thrilled that I came, and I'm feeling really good about this now. I thought that was in bad faith doing that. I love the questions about the leads, and I think that those comments were discredited. So thank you very much. I think the massive apartment buildings that you've put up have downgraded our quality of life. I feel it every day, and the people I know feel it every day, and we will do what we can to not have another one.
Thank you for your comments. I would say this, that I think an accusation of bad faith is not appropriate here. Rebecca Brown, is that her name? Had a family emergency. There's nothing that can be done about that. We couldn't do the parking and traffic tonight. From our perspective, it made sense to continue on, and I know that that wasn't what the applicant was expecting. So there's no bad faith here, okay? So we're better than that. We're all better than that. Jack Escher. And sir, if you could state your name and address for the record, and again, we would ask that you that every person speaking tonight address your comments to the board, please.
Thank you. I am Jack Escher. I reside at 19 Giles Ave in Beverly. And I also have a part-time law practice. I operate from my home as well. Essentially, I have not been before the board before on this project. I'm kind of a latecomer to the whole thing. You just heard from my wife, who clearly was not happy with this project at all. And I'm hearing more and more about it pretty much every day as I learn more about it. And it's my fault, my bad, that I'm not on top of this project the way I think I would have liked to have been as a Beverly resident. But now that I've been finding out more about it, and every day seems to be something else, I don't like it. And I wouldn't certainly accuse someone of bad faith either, but the tension of getting ready for a public hearing, and then at the very last minute, hearing that, oh, a continuance is being granted, is just super unfortunate. I would have to say it doesn't help the feeling that, you know, what is this project doing? Where's it going? Why is it being approved? And what kind of oversight is
Mr.
happening?
Asher, I'm
with this
going to
project?
ask you and ask all members of the audience to address your comments as to the substance of the project and not what brought about a continuance or the request for the continuance.
Certainly.
Let's stay with the merits of the project, if we could, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you. So the issue of, you know, the project's impact on the quality of life in Beverly, has there been a study done, and has the board considered the results of that study on what that impact is? I guess is my first question to the board.
There has not.
And then the next question is, does the board also have questions, or have they had questions about how this project does impact what we think of as the quality of life, the historical significance of those properties that are being replaced, and that's going to be basically gone? What is replacing that? Is there historical features that this project will try to at least emulate or capture in some way to continue to have our life in Beverly and our town be the way it has been that has brought us all to live here in the first place?
I would respectfully suggest that the applicant has brought forth a project that they think captures what they consider to be the important elements that need to be captured. I think that what this board will consider at the time it makes its decision is all, or are all, of those elements that you have just discussed, as well as other issues. I would respectfully, sir, you have said that you're relatively new to this project.
Yes.
I would urge you to go back and look at the historical record of this project and see the development and the changes that have gone on from the applicant's perspective.
And so I would love to do that, and I will make that commitment to do it. And where are we, if I may ask, in this process of how many more hearings will go forward, what actually needs to happen here before the developer is given a green light to build this thing and start breaking ground in the way that they're proposing, or as it may be modified?
There's no set deadline that this will continue until this board determines that it has sufficient information, both from the applicant and from the public, as to this project. It will then close the public hearing at the appropriate time, deliberate and render a decision on the site plan approval and the two special permits that have been requested.
Do you folks feel you're more than 50% on that spectrum, or do you have a sense?
I do not want to get into any type of where we stand on issues or where we are in the process.
But is it then safe to assume, for me as an interested citizen, that we've got a couple of months more before this could get approved?
I honestly don't know. You can be assured that this will continue on into November.
And the hearing in November 19th will be this format of a hearing as well?
Yes.
And will there be a limitation on what concerns can be raised in that hearing?
I'm hoping that at that meeting, the at least the focus of the discussion will be on parking and traffic. Will we limit public comment to that? No.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Tom Hayes? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hayes. We're down to Mr. Robert, is it Moser?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This isn't really my gig. I don't come to these things, but I'm a veteran on housing. I'm a single parent. And I think we have to address the dirty ward that I haven't seen anyone. I think.
Pardon me for just a minute, sir. Could I ask your name and your address for the record,
Robert Moser,
please?
17 Beckford Street, Apartment 2, Madam Chairman. I apologize. So I'm a veteran on housing. While I go to school, I'm a single parent. And I think we're not addressing the dirty word. I think Mr. Derrick was dancing around it. It was gentrification. And when you build 4 properties with minimal amount of affordable housing, which is arguable because as a person on housing and going through 3 different housing boards, none of these fall into the affordable housing. You're pricing us out on purpose. And then the other rippling effect that it has when you build big properties like this is other property owners are now renovating their apartments and marking up their apartments to an unaffordable housing rate. So even though you've said that you've fallen within the affordable housing rate, rates of apartments that are affordable under the Affordable Housing Act in Massachusetts, you're not taking into account the rippling effect you have on, say, my street, Beckford Street, and Mill Street, and Bennett Street, and all the other streets from the other side of the tracks that you're trying to price us out of. So me, as a concerned citizen, as someone who's grown up in Beverly, who's dedicated time to helping other veterans and helping within the community, I seriously would recommend to the board, or I voice my concerns that this is pricing us out of the city, and this is kicking all of our working class and poor citizens out of this town. And I don't think I'm going to like the landscape of this place within 5 to 10 years after you guys make this building and other buildings. And I want to know what you guys have done to address us, the people that are being priced out of this town. That's pretty much all I have to say. I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wish that we had the answer to a loaded question like gentrification, or Mr. Beckwith's question about how these projects influence rents up and down the ladder streets between Cabot and Rantoul Street. I think that all of us could bring various suppositions as to what's causing that. I think that the city is not unique in experiencing, nor is this area of downtown unique in experiencing spiraling housing costs. I mean, that is an issue that is widespread, and I respectfully would take issue with all of that falling at the feet of Beverly Crossing. We are, in fact, by building these projects, supplying a greater diversity of housing. We are they are doing their part to allow folks who live in Beverly, who are selling, who are empty nesters, to move downtown, freeing up more inventory at the more affordable levels for other people to get into the home buying market. Does it create pressure on downtown rents? I'm sure it is one of many factors creating pressure on downtown rents. I do not think that it is the only one, or that it is even the most important one. Again, every day you pick up the paper and we read about spiraling rents. And on the flip side, I would say to the gentleman that, in fact, this company has provided affordable housing at a rate that would match most of the nonprofits in this city over the past 10 years. Yes, they've been done in conjunction with market rate projects, but nevertheless, the supply of affordable units that will be permanently restricted is there. And it's in excess of 50 units, and not including this project, and not including 32 units of very deeply subsidized veterans housing at 60 Pleasant Street. So, you know, and this project in particular provides a diversity of units that this board has not seen with any of these projects before. The 50% AMI and 30% AMI units at 2 Hardy Street, respectfully, sir, are affordable units. And they're much more affordable than the 80% units that have been created in all of these projects to date. So I know this is hard, and I know this community is grappling with it, but it's not, that cannot be laid entirely at the feet of this applicant, respectfully. Chris, did you want to add anything?
Thank you.
Actually, the only thing I will add, and I think we've had a slide to this, is that
Chris, I'm sorry, you've spoken a couple times and I haven't asked you for your name and your address, just for the record.
Chris Copeland, Beverly Crossing, we're at 15 Rantoul Street. I did have a slide that maybe we have here, but most of our residents are from Beverly and the North Shore. Most people come from Beverly and the North Shore. Most people work here. And I think part of the problem that we see too is that there are a lot of good job creation centers here in Beverly. Beverly's getting better. Beverly's getting more popular, and we need housing supply. That's the way we see it. I don't want to go too much further. Miranda said a lot, but there are a lot of Beverly people living here, and they come from Beverly. That's what they tell us.
Thank you. Mr. John Newman?
John Newman, 40 Ober Street. So I too come late to this project, and I regret my lateness, but I'm inspired by a letter to the editor of October 19th by Peter Johnson entitled "Searching for the Soul of the City." I commend it to you if you haven't read it. The numbers on the screen and the project as it stands, for me, causes me to partially glaze over because my impetus, and I'm probably too far down the road, is the loss of the buildings. I work for the National Park Service in Salem, and when those buildings are gone, they won't come back. I don't see these buildings as diversity. I see the loss of those buildings as a loss of diversity. I don't see them in conjunction with the depot or with the post office in any way, the scale of the Veterans Square there. And I'm sorry, but I find these buildings an affront for that area of our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. The next person is Wendy Pearl. Ms. Pearl, I know you've spoken before, so unless you have something new, okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Can everybody hear me? I was having a hard time hearing everybody. I'm just going to cut to the chase.
Sorry, ma'am, name and address, please.
Oh, sorry, Wendy Pearl, 21 Morningside Drive. I had kind of an intro and a whole eloquent thing to say, but I basically want to ask every board member to make sure you have all the information you need before you make a decision. All the information that's been presented has been set to an agenda to develop the site in a way that this applicant wants to see. They've controlled this conversation from the beginning, and I think we have to think about the information we can gather that isn't generated from the applicant. One of those things is a balloon test. You're probably familiar with the way they test the height of cell towers to see what the visual impacts will be. You float a balloon to the height of a structure, and you see what it looks like in the landscape. This is a project where we could do a balloon test and actually understand where is that height when we're coming up Rantoul Street. What does it look like when we come out of the depot? How does it feel when we're in the park to have that height? So you could ask this applicant to do a certified balloon test, which the Mass Historical Commission asks applicants to do all the time. The FAA does them all the time to get their federal permits. This is a normal part of permitting in a lot of parts of the country, in a lot of communities, and at the state level as well. So if that's a piece of information that could help you decide, I think it's a way for the public to understand the impacts of this building on the landscape and to actually see it in the landscape and not in a flat rendered kind of two-dimensional drawing that the applicant creates. So that's all I wanted to say, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay, there is no one else who has signed up to speak. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay, let's line up. If you've spoken already, I'm going to ask again.
Jim Younger, 32 Buttman Street.
Mr. Younger,
I've never actually spoken. I've been giving you letters,
Okay, fair
and I've usually been very, oh, let's move the meeting to the senior center, so I'm happy to have the opportunity. And specifically, I know that you've been asking me every time I come up to address the board, and I'd really like to take that opportunity to address the board individually, because I actually have been following this process along with Depot Matters, which I'm a proud member of, in watching the process, and so I'd like to make some comments that have to do with where we are to date. It provides a summary, and it asks some specific questions of the board members themselves. And it's brief. So let me remind the board that Depot Matters is not anti-development. We are about right-sized development. We are impressed with the project just to the south of Depot 1, developed by Sarah Barnett and Icon Architecture. This award-winning project with 67 units of housing was built with a design that reinforces Rantul's streetscape and provides a number of housing units for Beverly's workforce, a mix of housing with units from 60 to 80% of the area's median income. The project was applauded by Aaron Clausen, our city director of planning, and in the local press. Since the beginning of the city review of Depot 2, we've seen no significant changes to the project. Yes, the material selections have been developed and articulated with a more complete palette of color and detail, and a few references have been made to the nature of details that evoke an attempt to resurrect the historic architecture that has been lost. But Beverly deserves better. The parking requirements within the zoning guidelines were developed by the city to provide the architect guidance to ensure the building design is appropriately sized. Doesn't asking relief time after time illustrate how this project design is too large for the site? Mr. Bosch, if they get your name correctly, it's a Bosch? Close enough, all right. Has been asking the right questions, and we didn't get to see the traffic tonight, but we'll see it on the 19th. How will this project affect parking and traffic in the area? Is the intersection at Rantoul and Railroad Avenue already a D, while it's not an F? Isn't that already a failing grade? Mr. Miller, I'm so pleased to hear you ask that building design and construction be sustainable, and I'm glad to hear you question the LEED certifiability, because LEED itself is a serious program, and it does cost money to be certified. So I'm glad you caught that. With some real commitment to green design, this building could really be green. Does anyone ever consider a LEED rating, or better yet, have you of course recognize that the greenest building is the building that is already in existence. Adaptive reuse of the Casa de Luca building would save all that embodied energy and begin to contribute to the decarbonizing of the city. Adaptive actions that contribute to conversations and examples of action to address our climate crisis. Beverly deserves better. Ms. Kilcoyne, we appreciate your questions related to the possible retention of Casa de Luca. Did you know the reason the Beverly Historic Commission has the one-year-long delay power is to provide the developer an opportunity to reach out to the community to find possible adaptive reuse solutions for the buildings like Casa de Luca? I just read that the historic Salem Diner is going to be saved, moved, and incorporated onto a rooftop of 10 Derby Street in Salem. Now that's thinking outside of the box. We've seen no options from the architect that incorporate any of the historic fabric. In fact, even the clock tower and other nods to the past that were apparently embraced by historic Beverly have disappeared from all design documents. Mr. Barrett, who's not here tonight. You expressed some concerns about the height and density of the proposed design, and the architect responded to your concerns by restating that the high density and added height are required by Mr. Copeland in order to pay for the higher costs of the architectural detailing they are proposing. Beverly deserves better. One of my favorite moments, almost done, during the planning board review came when Ms. Hutchinson asked about the proposed color of the top 2 floors of this building. The developer asked you what colors you wanted them to be painted. And what did you say? You said you prefer those 2 floors were not even there. Ms. Bartley, I'm sorry to say that this project includes no on-site affordable housing. And when Mr. Copeland answered your question, he made it clear that no affordable housing will be included in this project at this location. Beverly deserves better. And it's time for you, the leaders of the city, the mayor who was in the back of the room when I started, he's still there, that's great, and his capable planning staff to listen to the people, listen to the abutters, denying Mr. Copeland his special permit requests. And I thank you again for all your hours of service.
Okay, next, just a reminder, there's 3 minutes left, and then we have to move to the next public hearing.
Lynn Huber, 19 Lyman Street. I have just 2 quick comments. One was that in the presentation from the last meeting, there was an allusion to what the property values have done in that area with the increase of these kind of buildings. My question, to whether it's appropriate or not, to give us a sense of what the appreciation of buildings in Beverly has been in general, because I felt like that was an isolated piece of information. But as we all know, there's been a lot of our properties have gone up, our taxes have gone up. So I just wanted to go with that one question. I have a comment based on tonight. While I'm not personally happy with this building, I do think it's too big and the wrong thing in that area. Given the fact that they have opened up that 600 square foot space, I would like to make a suggestion, which is that that space is directly across from the train station. And I would like to see them put in that space, should this building be built, the Charlie card kiosks that are available over in Salem that they've just put in. It would be a very accessible space. Now, I understand there might be some security reasons that they might not want to allow access to that spot, but it seems to me that if that whole building is about, we want to be near the transportation, this is something that they could add that would be entirely helpful to the whole city of Beverly and anybody who wanted to use that depot, because we've lost the ability to buy tickets right there where the train is. Thank you.
Okay, I'd welcome a motion to continue this public hearing. Thank you. I would welcome a motion to continue this public hearing until the 19th. Is there a second? Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Motion passes. The hearing's continued to November 19th. Thank you. I'll restate. Our next agenda item is the continued public hearing, site plan review number 143-19 and special permit number 173-19 to construct a three-story restaurant containing ground floor amenities, including restroom, snack bar, small commercial space for water-related retail or recreational use on land owned by the City of Beverly. Property address is 1 Water Street. The applicant is Beverly Restaurant Associates, LLC.
We're still in public hearing. We do that, yeah. Good evening, members of the board. Miranda Gooding from Glovsky & Glovsky, 8 Washington Street.
as you mentioned, this is a continued public hearing, and this evening, we actually made the bulk of our presentation at the first public hearing on October 1st, and as members will recall, had an opportunity for some preliminary public comment as well. This evening, we intend to update you on just some developments since the last meeting, and also the project architects is here, Jim Souza from Bisbano Associates, to actually walk you through the design of the project, which brings me to the first update, which is that the Design Review Board has issued a favorable recommendation since the last time we met. So this project has also now concluded its review by both parking and traffic and by the Design Review Board as part of the special permit process. And I guess just in thinking about where we left off at the last meeting, I thought it would be helpful just to respond to some of the public comments from the last meeting, which I think understandably related primarily to parking. And I'd like to just take a moment to reiterate a couple of key points for the board's consideration. And as you know, and I should state for the record, Rebecca Brown, who presented on parking and traffic for this project at the last meeting, is unable to be here since the bulk of her presentation was actually given last time. Her associate, Doug Halpert, is here to answer any follow-up questions with respect to this project. But as we informed members of the board earlier, Rebecca's father unfortunately had a stroke and could not be here today, and she could not be here today. So this site, as you all know, and I hope appreciate by now, it is a challenging site. It requires a considerable investment from the applicant, including a long-term lease obligation for 40 years with the city that not only includes ongoing lease payments, but the obligation to invest over $4.5 million to construct this building and associated site improvements that are required as part of the regulatory process that overlays this site. Obviously, that kind of obligation and risk necessitates a business that is scaled to meet those obligations. And in this case, I would like to point out that the applicant's proposal during the RFP process with the city actually proposed a 411-seat restaurant. So that was at the outset, at which point during the RFP process and in discussions with the city, before we got to the board, that number was reduced to the current proposed figure of 340 seats. So I would like to emphasize that while I appreciate that there are concerns about this project being oversized, the need is real for the size here and for the scale, and I think that Mr. Bloom has made a real effort to address those concerns already, and he remains, open and willing to do whatever he can to address parking needs in particular for this project, in concert with the city, of course, who owns the site. And along those lines, as the building is described tonight by Jim, I'd ask board members to please pay special attention to some of the amenities that he's going to point out, particularly on the first floor and on the surrounding site, because all of those certainly add to the cost and significant nature of this obligation. It is not for this is not for an amateur to take on a restaurant at this site. A lot of these improvements are actually going to enhance in a significant fashion the city's waterfront parcels, connecting the parcel itself to the recreational marina at Glover's Wharf, as well as Ferryway Landing, the commercial marina, and of course the public city's pier. All of these are going to be integrated in a way that we have not had an opportunity to enjoy in this city, and I think that's a real benefit that needs to be highlighted with this project. I think this investment is fantastic news for Beverly. We've been waiting to have this parcel really fully utilized since it was acquired by the city in 1996. It's essentially laid fallow for a good amount of that time. with only one other serious contender ever stepping up to really take this on. And I think that that is something that should weigh heavily and seriously on all of us. This project may not be perfect, but perfect shouldn't be the enemy of good in this case. And I think that many in the city have been waiting eagerly to see this parcel activated. I will finally like to say that with regard to parking, we understand there are concerns, but also the board should recognize that this site does actually comply with the parking requirements by the city. And notwithstanding that, Mr. Bloom has committed to lease off-site parking for 25 employee parking spaces at his cost, and to provide shuttle service to and from the restaurant and that site, as well as incorporating patron service into that shuttle service to assist with the parking demand for the property. So there's a lot of work here that's been done. Finally, I believe that Aaron Clausen is here this evening and is going to be briefing the board on the Parking and Traffic Commission's recommendation in particular, and some of the considerations that went into that. I think that was a very carefully conditioned decision and reflects the partnership that exists between the city and the applicant, and the reality that this is going to be an ongoing sort of monitoring and an ongoing commitment to continue to find, parking that will satisfy the various needs in the area, in addition to the improved traffic infrastructure that we discussed last time. So with that introduction, I would turn this over to Jim to go through the design.
Madam Chair, before we lose Ms. Gooding?
Yes.
May I?
Please.
Without disputing any of what you just said, and understanding that we may hear from Mr. Clausen, the concern I raised the last time had to do with traffic, and with the idea that even when it gets a little bit of improvement, that intersection is going to continue to be a failing intersection. What am I supposed to do with that? Why should I add a single additional car to that intersection if it's already failing?
Well, I believe that, Doug, we have a handout to describe, actually in more eloquent terms than I can, what the level of service grades, if you will, actually mean, and why, respectfully, I think that the grades are indicative of what, from an engineering perspective, are acceptable levels of service at an intersection, and E is an acceptable level of service at an intersection. But I'm going to let Doug. I can hand out what he has, and he can give that explanation. And I believe that Mr. Clausen had some thoughts on that as well.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Douglas Halpert from Greenman Peterson. Do you want our office address as well, for the record? 181 Bowardvale, Wilmington. So the question about the levels of service, with the levels of service E, the handout that I've just supplied to, sorry, I don't have enough copies for everyone, but speaks to the capacity analysis methodology laid out in the latest Highway Capacity Manual, which is HCM 6th edition. And I'll read you what it says for the levels of service E, which says, level of service E represents operating conditions with high delay values. This level is considered by many agencies to be the limit of acceptable delay, and MassDOT would be one of those accepting agencies. So the future levels of service for the future year analyses, which do include our project, I believe that the last time we presented showed the no build and build condition, and the no build condition takes into account the planned intersection reconstruction. And then with our traffic added to that, and some slight modifications to the proposed traffic timings, which we did submit to the city's design engineer, we will be able to get levels of service E or better for all study area intersections. Does that answer your question, sir? Highway Capacity Manual, the latest version is the 6th edition, came out 2016.
Your representation is that the definitions you provided here on the first page of this document are taken verbatim from that manual?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And on the second page, where you'll see the levels of service criteria, that's the ranges that look at delay and their correspondence with the level of service designation by their letter.
Okay.
Madam Chair? Oh, can I ask a question? So if I'm not a traffic expert, counting on experts like you and, our commission, et cetera, to help educate me, but let me throw out a question maybe that we might relate to and maybe the members of the audience would relate to. So can you tell us what intersections currently in Beverly are level E, so that we all have a sense as to what you are saying that you're going to strive to equal? Yeah. So which intersections are at level E?
Within the study area?
No.
For all of them?
Yeah. Give us a sense, pick out some of the notable intersections in town and pick out some Fs and pick out some Es and pick out some As. No, I'm just asking, but I would say that if we don't have that, maybe we can ask our commission for that information.
I would hesitate because I'm on the record, but I don't have enough knowledge for all the intersections. I will say that we noticed that there have been improvements along Rantoul Street in general since the Mass DOT project has been completed. There's updated signal timings, there's updated detection, improved lane markings, spaces for bikes, sidewalks, etc. So all those things point to progress. But for all the intersections, I couldn't.
And that's unfair, and I didn't mean it really as a gotcha question. I just want people to have a good idea as to what a level E represents, so that we have it not on an abstract piece of paper, but something that is more akin to what we see every day in the city, so that we could just make that. So you might not have that information, and that's very fair. I wasn't trying to get you, just trying to get the information.
I can read you from the handout that I believe is being circulated to you if you like, as far as what the ranges of levels of service correspond to, but that's about all I can do for right now.
Just trying to get a sense and to get a sense as to how this fits with Beverly overall. And I know that's might be unfair to ask you. I'd
be happy to speak to you directly about the study area intersections that we have analyzed.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And I would just say, not being a traffic engineer myself, I appreciate the questions. I would point out that the Parking and Traffic Commission is headed by a very able parking engineer, and that those folks on the commission certainly have more experience with various intersections in Beverly, which are probably at level of service E and frequently even worse. So I think that hopefully Mr. Clausen can also back up the fact that the commission did take a hard look at this, and they were in particular scrutinizing the level of service and the improvement that would be available based on both the project as well as the proposed improvements by Mass DOT. So would you, would the board prefer to have continued questions, or should we do the design presentation at this point? I don't want to cut Mr. Best short, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm persuaded, but I will wait to hear more.
You want to go ahead? You should be queued to go.
Hi, I'm Jim Souza. I am employed at Bisbano Associates. I'm a senior interior designer. I've been designing restaurants for over 35 years and in the hospitality division of the market. Our office is in Providence, Rhode Island at 188 Valley Street. I'm not sure how much you were, the architecture of the project was described to you in the earlier meeting, but I will walk through the floor plans first and then the exterior as we start here with the first slide, which is the ground floor, which with some of the agencies, we need to keep that some around 90% to the public and support to the public areas. What you'll find in the right lower corner is a public access bar that is open to the public there without having to go into the restaurant. The next in the center is an art gallery, which was a request from one of the agencies. The next on the floor plan, which all faces the water, by the way, is the snack bar. And the left-hand corner is a retail area, which may be, there's not really a assigned product that will be selling or products that will be selling, but more of a rental or small wares for enjoying the waterfront. Well, let me go back. So the middle portion of the plan is support areas for both the restaurant upstairs and downstairs. They'll be shared for the bar, the snack bar, and the retail. So you'll have storage, prep for the snack shack, the storage for the beer, wine, liquor that we sold at the bar, and any support lighting pedestals for the art gallery. And in the upper right-hand corner is the access and entrance for the restaurant on the second two floors, second and third floor, stairway and elevator. And in the left corner, which is sort of void on the plan, is 2 parking spaces undercover. The second floor is the main floor of the restaurant. You, as described at the entrance, you access it from the elevator or the stairs. You have a core of restrooms and the kitchen, which is on the street side of the building. As one item which you always try to strive for when you're doing a waterfront restaurant is have every seat as a good seat and you're facing the water. So that's what we are attempting to do here. So you have a bar in the corner, similar to one that has been done in Swampscott. Similar shape, and then the general seating for the restaurant on the left side of the plan. The kitchen, as you can see, located in the street side of the restaurant, which would be some prep and cook line, and access there from the kitchen on the left side. It also acts as the egress stair as well for the building. The third floor, or rooftop floor, which has about a third of the space, which would be open to the outdoors year-round, but most of it can be closed down, but during the summer months, it'll be open. The windows/doors that'll be utilized are vertical bifold windows, which open the space totally to the environment for views and fresh air during the season, which will allow it, meaning late spring to late summer, end of September probably. Again, a smaller kitchen to support this floor, which would probably be utilized just in about 9 weeks of the season of the year. Some of the elevations, this is the water side view. As you can see, starting from the first floor is all the public access, for the retail, for the snack shack, the art gallery, and the local bar. Second floor, which also has windows that open up almost totally. There'll be nano windows which slide open to the sides and give a wide opening for views to the water. Again, the third floor, you can see what the vertical bifolds would look like on the left side of the building, and the 2/3 of the building up on the top is what the area would be that is open year-round to the elements. The bridge side of the building is this one. It would have the stairway on that side, egress stair, and access to the other two floors. Again, examples of the nano windows and the vertical bifolds on the third floor. The materials you see are all white cedar shingles with a gray stain predominantly, and then you'll see on the next slide where the windows are, some are false because this is the kitchen side of the building, so it's the windows would not be able to be used. So we plan on doing an art piece on the facing the street, and utilizing a pop-out where the where the entrance it accents the entrance to the building, and that would be in a white color, and the rest of the building would be a gray shingle, very typical, with white trim, which you'll see in further slides. And this is the marine side of the restaurant. This is one of the slides that face the water renderings, where it has public access seating, ADA ramp up to it, with, if you, on the left side of the slide is a 10-foot walkway up to the street and sidewalk, which gives access to the waterfront. Get another view of the restaurant on the marina side, the red warehouse building, that would be the view from there. Again, the street view with the art piece, which is still, that's one of the items that we are going back to design for, to see different options for the art piece. And another view from the little park on the side and further back where the bridge is.
That's the east elevation.
Correct. Northwest. Sorry.
East and west of that.
West elevation. This is a view from the bridge, looking down onto the building. And that's the proximity to the water the front of the restaurant would be. Still keeping the walkway on the water side, and the public access seating would be right there with great views of the water. And this, I believe you've seen before.
Yeah, so when you, just, maybe it's that slide or one of the others, just trying to get a handle on the public access seating that you're talking about. Is that the restaurant patron seating that's adjacent to the public walkway?
It's at the water side of the restaurant, and it's at...
Yeah, with the lounge chairs, the white lounge chairs, the curved fence there, and the greenery and things. Is that public access there?
Yes, that is.
And
That
so-
is to use, anyone can use that, and they can go into the snack bar and grab something to eat and eat it out there.
Or not?
Or not.
Okay.
Good evening. For the record, Scott Cameron with the Mooring Cameron Group, 66 Elm Street in Danvers. Just to elaborate a little bit more on that. So everything on the ground level of this property is open to the public, with the exception of the service areas that are in support of those ground floor uses and some of the restaurant uses above. So there's a very small portion of that ground level within the building that Jim highlighted that supports storage, freezers, refrigerators, solid waste, et cetera. So that does not exclude this area. This is an open area. It's a pavilion. It's going to be elevated up about 18 inches above the existing pier location. And what Mr. Bloom has offered in the proposal is to put seating. It's movable seating. It's not stuff that you're going to be able to pick up and walk away with. It's going to be pretty darn heavy, but it's not permanent. Anybody can use it at any time. The idea is to activate that space, promote people to come down. If they just want to come down and have a picnic, if they're on lunch break, if they're weekends with the kids, they can just come down here and hang out. It just so happens that there will be other support waterfront uses in that ground level with the retail space, the snack shop, the art gallery meeting space. So this is where we're talking about that interface and that activation of the ground level with all this space, which is currently gravel and concrete.
And may I ask, how will the public know that they have the right to access that part of the building?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there's multiple regulatory levels, but starting with the Urban Self-Help Grant, one of the conditions in there is that signage be posted everywhere to make sure that it is crystal clear. We'll also be going through a Chapter 91 process with Mass DEP Waterways. A big part of that is also focused on signage. The public, make sure the public is aware that this is their space on the ground level. And that will also direct people to restrooms inside, make sure, even if they're coming probably from the front of the building, in the parking area, that they know they can walk around and get to the restroom access. Something that's directional, it's informational, and that's the goal.
So then I assume the the art gallery and meeting space then is also open to the public.
Correct.
Is it open to the public, like could a person rent the meeting space, or is it truly open, like you can just walk in there anytime and sit in there?
I don't know if the exact terms of it would be open to the public to reserve. I imagine no different than reserving this space here for this meeting.
Okay. That's helpful.
Yep.
Great. That's great.
And is the plan to lease out that waterfront retail section?
Yes.
And what's the approximate square footage of that?
So I'm going to ask a couple of obvious questions here. First of all, public access to the waterfront, you've pushed this pretty close to the edge. Understandable in trying to fit parking in and things like that, but the other thing that's of note, and I know you want to maximize the paying publics, the people from the public who come in and pay, and they're sitting in the dining room, be able to maximize the views. But was there any thought to trying to find a way to position the building so that it didn't block as much of the waterfront view from people who are driving, walking, living in the area?
Just going to move. This is actually a good demonstration of the mass in the building. Yeah, we went through several concepts. This board or previous versions had seen another concept of this with the former proposal. The charges before us with this were the primary goal was to maximize the rejuvenation of this waterfront. We wanted an active space. From our perspective, that no different than how you have a retail store on a city frontage street on Cabot Street. You want to maximize that ground level space. It's no different here. We wanted that store frontage so it's wide and open. We didn't want, for example, parking coming down closer to that area as maybe seen on prior alternatives for this property. The width between the building and the pier, this is actually set back further than prior proposals. We felt that we're not touching at all the concrete pier portion of it. We are really landscaping and improving that, and the seating and everything else is behind that, where the building itself is set back behind that area. Obviously, the other charge, as we've heard, is parking. And by orienting the building in this manner, we create a very efficient and we maximize the space in the property for that parking. Shifting that building back or in different orientations resulted in significant reductions in the parking and the utilization, as well as created irregular and difficult to navigate aisles that are kind of L-shaped or U-shaped, and in this case we have the opportunity to have a big open efficient parking area. So we've gone through quite a bit of a thought into this, and going back to the massing of this, as you look at the size of the building relative to others, it's a relatively narrow property to begin with as far as the width of it. The zoning bylaw allows up to 150-foot wide building. We are about 105 feet, so it's much narrower than what even the zoning ordinance allows. And on each side of this, you have open areas. So you have Ferry Landing Park between this and the Harbor Master building, and then you have the boat storage area on the adjacent property up to the red building on the other side. It is also set down lower, so Cabot Street, the bridge, and even the neighborhood, the topography goes up higher as you come up to Water Street and beyond. Because it's set back from the street, instead of seeing obstruction close, the building's far away from you, so your sight lines around it are great. So there was a lot of consideration into that.
And what's the distance from the end of the pier where the water is, if I jump off, to the building itself now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't believe we have copies that show that distance. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so the site layout plan, but the color illustration is a little easier to see. So the point from the edge of the concrete here to the nearest corner of the building here is 44 feet in width. And then on each side, you have approximately 20 feet here, and then approximately 25 feet on this side, which will be landscaped, and then a 10-foot wide pedestrian walkway within those areas.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I want to correct that. I'm sorry, the 44 feet goes to an awning that extends 11 feet off the building. So the building itself is actually closer to 55 feet. To clarify that, that's on the site layout plan in the plan set.
Just for the board's perspective, you got updated renderings and architectural plans for this application, but your site plan was in your prior packet. I see people looking for it, so you already had it.
Wondering if you're allowing dog access here?
Dog is in pet. I would assume it would fall under the same rules as any other city park. Yeah. There wouldn't be any restrictions on our end.
Why don't we ask Mr. Clausen on behalf of parking and traffic to step forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Planning Board members. I'm Aaron Clausen, Planning Director for the City of Beverly and Vice Chair of the Parking and Traffic Commission. I can give you, I think, a brief overview of the recommendation that's before you and answer any questions you might have. Generally speaking, what I just note is that the Commission looked at the original traffic impact analysis back in, I believe it was September, asked for additional information in that analysis, primarily around the intersection and the level of service question, the queue and capacity analysis. As was stated, the project, the intersection is programmed with the MPO and the Transportation Improvement Program for reconstruction summer of 2020. And so the original analysis took the traffic operations data from the 75% design of that intersection. Our request was to, A, look at the intersection at 100% design, as there had been some tweaks to the intersection, particularly around the operations. The second piece was to look at the approach to the intersection from Water Street, which has been mentioned here a number of times, that the level of service was at a lower EF following the build of the intersection and the proposed build of the restaurant, and looking at opportunities to enhance that and looking at the entire operation of the intersection. I should note that as a queue and capacity analysis is done for an intersection, particularly a signalized intersection, it provides a level of service rating for each approach and turning movement, and then has a composite rating for the intersection together. And so the only, and as was stated earlier, I just want to kind of pull this out a little bit, the only approach that is operating, I think there's only two that are operating at level of service E following construction, is the Water Street approach. Currently, it's a level of service F. And the one thing I would state about the level of service is it's easy to kind of conflate it with what you were graded in school, and that, D is, approaching a failing grade. That's not how this is applied. I know it's an A, B, C, D, E, F rating system, but it's not at all related to what you would have gotten in school. It's related to delay and queue capacity. It is a true statement that E is generally accepted as an acceptable level of service. It's the limit of that. As soon as you get to F, that's when you want to seek improvements. You're always looking for improvements, but when you're looking for balancing the operations of an intersection, you're trying to balance them off each other. So what we asked for as a commission, the applicant to look at was what other approaches to the intersection could be shifted a little bit to give a little bit more green time being the signal green on Water Street approaching the intersection. And they were able to do that by adjusting, I think it was 2 seconds on one of the approaches, maintaining, I think it was a D level of service, and gaining an improved level of service for Water Street. And I think what's important, what we pointed out as a finding in our recommendation, is that post-construction of the site, looking out 7 years, it's operating, all the approaches are operating better than they are currently. So what you experience now will be better following the construction of the restaurant. And only one, I think it's 2 approaches, sorry, are at the level of service E. I can't remember the composite, but I believe the composite level of service for the entire section was D. So the other things that we looked at and note, again, the city has been working for several years now with MassDOT to improve that intersection, to improve operations generally, but also in anticipation of redevelopment of the Water Street project, the One Water Street property. It's part of what's called the 3-intersection project in the TIP, and as I noted, it's programmed for federal fiscal year 21. That means construction would begin sometime around summer of 2020. The current, current operations for the intersection, Water Street, there's multiple approaches, I should say, not just Water Street, that are operating at level of service F currently. They all are improved following construction of the intersection and following construction of the site. The project proponent has improved pedestrian improvements through the site. So one of the things that we also look at the commission is not just traffic operations, but how is the project itself meeting our complete street guidelines, meaning how is the property interfacing with the street network to improve access for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. So as you see through the site plan, there are multiple pedestrian access points from Cabot Street, which will be consistent with the improvements that are proposed as part of the reconstruction of the intersection, improving pedestrian access to the site. I should note that the reconstruction of the intersection includes bike lanes. So there's going to be new bike lanes, new bike access to the site. The project also proposes bicycle racks to be located on the site. So we also noted that as part of the proposal, not only is traffic going to operate better following reconstruction of the intersection, there's multiple modes and access to the site that are being approved. Then I think the last finding we noted was the transportation management plan that was submitted as part of their kind of the follow-on study of the project. Of particular note, we noted the off-site parking spaces for 25 employees, 25 spaces for employees with the shuttle that would provide service to the employees and potentially for patrons of the restaurant. That there's also a fairly extensive TDM plan that's proposed of the project, which includes things like employee and shift changes that avoid the peak period. So one of the things you want to do when you have your employees is coming in and bringing in shift changes. They're not coming at the peak morning, afternoon, or Saturday afternoon. So that's one way of minimizing traffic impacts. Joining the North Shore TMA, which is a transportation management association that works with businesses to minimize or mitigate the number of single occupancy trips that are made to a site, particularly around employees as well. The shuttle that the applicant is proposing fits nicely into that sort of a plan. The TMA can help them manage that in a way that maximizes employee, but potentially in the long run, customer trips to the site. It looks for the applicant also with membership with the TMA gets alternative modes of transportation, helping them with ride share. They have ride matching services, programming and incentives that, as I mentioned, promote modes of alternative modes of transportation. And then there's another service that's really important for commuters who take transit. It's a guaranteed ride home. So if you're taking transit to work and for whatever reason you need to get home for an emergency or the transit system's not working, the commuter rail's down for the evening, you can get a guaranteed ride home through Uber for free. So it's one of those barriers that the membership through TMA supports. So there was 5 conditions. The first one was essentially looking at a follow-on study I think it was 6 months or a year following occupancy of the property during the peak season of the summer, to look at how is the signal operations working at the intersection at Cabot and Rantoul, look at the parking, how's the parking management working, and how is the parking utilization affecting the surrounding neighborhood, and how is the transportation demand management plan operating, how well is it doing in mitigating single occupancy trips to the site. So that's a follow-on study that would be submitted to the Parking and Traffic Commission and would give opportunity to provide additional incentive or other scenarios or other interventions to further reduce traffic to the site. Prior to construction, we're also recommending that the Planning Board adopt this condition to have the applicant submit a construction coordination phasing traffic management plan during construction. So we're not only looking post-construction, but we're looking at ways how can we manage traffic during construction. That includes parking for contractors during that time. I mentioned the TDM plan, that be included as a condition of the project, and that the applicant had proposed as part of the commission meeting that they would include a parking attendant to assist with traffic management onto the site. As you know, there's also parking available on the other side of Cabot Street at 11 Cabot. This is the harbor management or the harbor master property. There's also the dairy, what we call the dairy lot, on the other side of the street near the Anchor Pub. So there's other locations for parking that the parking attendant could help customers find in that case. That's to help with circulation during the peak periods. And those are the 5 conditions that were recommended from the commission that the planning board could consider to adopt. I'm leave it at that and offer the opportunity to answer any questions you might have.
Did you say that traffic is going to be better after this, after you add the traffic from this? That's because of the improvement that's going to happen anyway. So the improvement is going to improve traffic whether this project is built or not. So you didn't mean to say that this project is going to cause an improvement. I think your comment did suggest that, and that was misleading.
That was not my intention. If I may finish, that was not at all my intention. My point was that the city moved forward a reconstruction of that intersection several years ago for the express purpose to improve operations at that intersection generally, but also in anticipation of a waterfront restaurant. By no means did I intend to state that a restaurant by itself would improve traffic at
In fact,
the site.
we know it's going to make traffic worse.
Well, my point is that traffic is not going to be worse after both of these 2 pieces are built.
Well, okay. The restaurant is going to add traffic. Something else may mitigate that, but the restaurant is going to add traffic.
That's correct.
And what you're saying is, as long as it doesn't take that intersection to an F, I should not care at all whether it's an A, B, C, D, or E. In fact, the Parking and Traffic Commission doesn't care whether it's an A, B, C, D, or E, as long as it's not an F.
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize it as not caring. I think what we look at as transportation planners and engineers, you're looking at how the function of the operations of that intersection are working. And if it's operating in E, that is considered generally as an acceptable level of service for a signalized intersection. However, we are always looking at ways to reduce congestion. You can do that through building more capacity. That means wider roads, additional lanes. The challenge with that is induced demand. Anytime you add more capacity by adding lanes or additional roadway, that induces demand. You usually get more congestion. So what we try to build into these projects are ways to encourage alternative modes of transportation so that people have options to get to a site other than taking a car on their own. So we care about congestion generally. It's not accurate to say that if it's a level of service E, we don't care as a commission.
In fact, it sounds like you want it to be an E so that you don't induce more demand. You want it to stay at an E so that, because if you improve it, more people are going to drive in.
Yeah, it's not that you would want it to be at E, but if it's at a level A, B, or C, I think
that's too good.
It's important to recognize that that's a free-flowing condition and is likely to attract additional traffic as there's more growth generally in the region.
what you've said about the grades.
My understanding when they were counting the parking spaces, that the lot that's near the anchor was not included in the totals, because that lot's never, like, the anchor fills that, and then the anchor fills up Congress Street as well. Having lived there for 20 years, I've never seen that lot open. So I just wanted to make sure that those spaces and up Congress Street towards the train tracks, are those included in the totals for the parking spaces?
So they were counted as part of the parking utilization for the entire area, but as part of that parking utilization, it was noted that that parking lot was basically full each occasion.
Remind me, what's the number of employees anticipated?
60 in the off-season, 120 in the summer.
60, 120. And we don't have a bike sharing program yet in Beverly, but I bet we will before too long. Have you considered a subsidized bike sharing for employees for that last mile?
Well, to be honest with you, a lot of our employees now come by ride sharing. Uber and Lyft is becoming the preferred way to come to work for us.
Yeah, that's certainly a way.
It seems to be the way we put it, as well as a big chunk of our guests as well. So we both seem to be embracing Uber and Lyft more and more as years go by.
Yeah, that's great. We have, I think, 5 train stations in the city, and I bet you some employees will be coming that way. That last mile is a challenge. And when we do someday have a bike sharing program, I'd like you to consider subsidizing a bike share program. It's another way to. And another question, traffic is obviously a major concern here. Has the city or the applicant considered doing a traffic simulation of this post-build scenario?
I think, that the traffic engineer could speak more eloquently than me about it, but generally speaking, what you get in terms of the queue and capacity analysis is a projection, a modeled projection of how the intersection is going to operate. And if you were to get a rendered animation, you're just looking at a visual representation of what that looks like.
You certainly are.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the point.
But it's not going to change the information, I guess.
No, it's not. It's going to change the way the information is presented.
Sure.
And to me, it makes it a lot more accessible to understand what we're looking at. We did this, you recall, for the Whole Foods project, and I think it was very helpful for me. Can't speak for anyone else. Do you care to address that?
Sorry, if you don't mind, I would backtrack real quick. I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding about which was the deteriorated level of service. So under the build conditions with the construction or the reconstruction of the intersection and the timings that we adjusted slightly from what had been submitted in the 100% design plans, the only movement during the weekday PM peak hour and the Saturday midday peak hour that will be a level of service E, the only movement will be the Water Street westbound approach. All other movements at that intersection will be level of service, D or better, with the overall intersection being a level of service B. What is currently now is a level of service D. So we have projected that there will be a reduction in overall delay from about 52 seconds to about 20 seconds during the weekday PM peak hour, and from about 40 seconds to about 18 seconds of overall delay in the Saturday midday peak hour. So it's not the whole overall intersection that's going from F to E. It's one movement that's going from F to E. For your visualization question, is this the one that advances? This one? So while I don't have a video, I believe we had the last time we presented. Bear with me as I click through these. So this is a still, not a video, but a still that shows the changes in 95th percentile Qs from no build to build conditions. And I recognize that it's a little farther away, so I'll just give you a sense. So for the Water Street westbound approach, where currently in 2019 we see a 95th percentile Q approaching 400 feet, so 392 feet. In the 2026 build conditions, with the proposed timings and geometries and with the proposed development in place, that 95th percentile will go down to 290, is what we've modeled. Now, also to note, because the Water Street intersection and the Route 1A intersection with Cabot are so close to each other, those signals will be coordinated. So it's worth noting that the queues along the Route 1A and both northbound and southbound will also be significantly reduced as well, because those intersections will be coordinated.
Okay, so that westbound queue, you did say 2026?
Yes, our future year conditions assumes for a 7-year design horizon.
Okay. Of course, by then, we won't have a bunch of boats parked there. There'll be activity there by that time, which, of course, is factored in, right?
Sorry, boats?
To the east of Water Street, right now, there isn't a lot of activity. There's a lot of boats parked there. We hope that in the future we'll see more activity than boats sitting.
Yes.
What's that?
That's not part of the build situation.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, it might be helpful to explain what are the underlying assumptions with respect to the 2026 build?
Sure. So for our 2026 build condition, well, would it be helpful if I went back to the existing conditions? Sure. And then we grew from there? So we counted volumes, which we submitted, and those volumes were seasonally adjusted to average month. Sorry, let me get the traffic stuff. Sorry, I don't want to mislead. Let me get my traffic study. Sorry, so we counted our volumes in May of 2019, so this year, while school was still in session, and we looked at those volumes against seasonal adjustments based on Mass DOT counts, and our counts were, May and June, and we noted that during those months, they were typically 4.2 and 9% higher than average month's conditions, and to be conservative, we did not adjust those down. So we had data during school hours, or while school was still in session, that was conservative for existing time period. We then looked at the future year growth trends in the area, again using Mass DOT count stations and accounting for other developments in the area, and we found that the rate of traffic was increasing by approximately 0.2% per year. And to be conservative, we assumed a 0.5% increase per year. And we assumed that 0.5 remains steady and compounded annually over 7 years. And that's how we got to our 2026 no build. And then with the build, we used ITE trip generation rates, which is the industry standard, and distributed that through our network, and that's how we got to the build. I can go into more detail about how those trips were calculated and distributed if you like.
Doesn't the 2026 build take into account certain developments along Rantoul Street, et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera?
Yes. So we had taking into account additional developments in the area and the planned roadway improvements at the intersections. So we had a list of 4 other developments in the area.
Thank you. Any questions?
Sure. Just 2 questions. And I think you're off the hot seat and Aaron's on now. So Aaron, a few minutes ago, we were trying to figure out or give people a comparison as to what intersection that is at an E. If you had some examples or could point out, some of our landmark intersections so that we have a sense as to how this fits into that.
Yeah, so going off of memory, it's hard to give you a specific one. I think some recent analysis looking at the Federal Street intersection at Rantoul, I think it's the northbound movement through the site at peak period is level service E.
How about in and around the Cummings Center, those intersections?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head of how those are operating. We have some analysis that we're doing as part of the police station, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. And then the other is, and I've been trying to pay attention and look for the stat at the same time, when is the expected completion of the intersection, all the work to get it to, the state it'll be in, to speed traffic through, and how does that sync with the opening of the restaurant within a range so that we have a sense? Do these sync?
Sure. So our hope is to have the project advertised by the end of this year through a bid process with MassDOT. Again, I mentioned that the construction target is to begin summer of 2020. It's probably going to take, all 3 intersections are going to take multiple construction seasons. We don't know the construction phasing. We won't know that until construction, the contractor is on board and is working through the design plan, the design documents to come up with a phasing piece of that. We work closely with MassDOT and articulating that phasing. MassDOT essentially project manages these projects because they're generally state and federal funded. So it's hard to tell you whether they'll line up exactly with it, with the construction and completion of the restaurant. But part of the recommendation and the condition from the commission was the construction phasing plan be submitted so that we can make sure that any interaction between those 2 construction phases are mitigated and they can be coordinated so that construction isn't affecting traffic and congestion terribly. We don't know exactly how the phasing is. I couldn't tell you at this point. I think the value of having the intersection being approved now, though, it fits nicely with our goals of redeveloping the waterfront.
Any other questions?
Question, just a comment that this project will necessarily increase the carbon footprint overall of the city. And I hope that all consideration is taken to absolutely minimize that carbon footprint for this project. And I don't think we've heard anything about it. I would like to.
Jim, can you comment just briefly on the level of elements in the design that address Mr. Miller's comments, as well as maybe I know that Marty has spoken about handling of food waste and recycling and composting.
Per the NRA, the National Restaurant Association, they've sent out an edict to utilize energy efficient equipment wherever possible. And that's what Marty has done in the past in his new builds. Also, all the lighting in the space will be LED, even the decorative lighting. We did this similar case in his restaurant in Swampscott, the Mission on the Bay. We'll also, with the materials that we're selecting for flooring, ceiling materials will be, as much as possible, recycled materials and sustainable materials. Just by the sheer use of the glass that we are using in the upper two floors, that will, with its southerly, eastern and west facing, will also give a passive solar effect on those two floors, with the bar areas and some of the areas that are exterior being a tile to absorb the that heat gain that will be done with the passive solar collection with the glass that is being used. Again, the equipment, being the MEP equipment, will also have energy efficient ratings that will minimize the use of energy in the restaurant.
Right behind you every time, Jim. I'm just going to go back. Well, I'm not going to flip all the plans. That took a while. The other improvements that are proposed, of course, almost the entirety of the property now is either building or asphalt or concrete. So there's almost no vegetation other than some planters that are just kind of dirt around the existing building. Through the redevelopment of this property, the open space, so land that is not going to be parking or building, will be increased to over 18,000 square feet, so 43% of the property. And that does include walkways and pedestrian areas, but the lion's share of that area is landscape. So we're taking a site that's pavement and concrete and converting a large portion of it to vegetation and screening. And then, of course, the other aspect is the building footprint itself, which is approximately 6,000 square feet from the bird's eye looking down.
And I would just add that in partial answer to your question are some of the TDM measures that were outlined as part of the parking and traffic recommendation earlier, Mr. Miller.
Okay, I'd like to open this up to questions or comments from members of the public. If you wish to make a comment, please form a line to where Mr. Clausen is, and we'll take everybody one at a time.
Absolutely. Dan Finn, Madam Chairperson, members of the Planning Board. 16 Front Street, Beverly, Massachusetts, lifelong resident. As you know, a major portion of this project is they need a special permit to increase the size of the building approximately 17%. So to get that special permit, they need to have a 15-foot walkway along the shore. So I would ask that they show us where the 15 feet of walkway is, and then as part two to that, you're also required to have a 10-foot walkway for the filling of tidelands, to have another walkway because it's on filled tidelands. So there should be a 25-foot walkway on this property that extends from one edge to the other. So I'd like to know where that 25-foot walkway is. That's right in your zoning. I didn't make it up. Thank you. Oh, and I have one other question after I get the answer to that one. Thank you.
So there are a series of walkways. So there's an existing walkway along the waterfront here that connects to the existing pathway here, and then this comes in from the Harbor Master lot off the plan view. So you have a 10-foot access coming through here, and then you get down to the waterfront area. This is approximately 15 feet here, and then 20 feet along the front. And then this is 10 feet all the way back up to Water Street. And then once we get past this point, a new curb ramp, and then tying into the existing brick sidewalk that wraps around back up to Cabot. So we designed that in accordance with the ordinance.
Could I, Madam Chairperson, I've actually done my own little drawing of what he's trying to talk about. And this is his 15-foot walkway right here. He's pointing with his arrow over here. Can everybody see this? This is the 15 feet. and
Sir,
this is the
please,
10
please
feet.
keep that, this is the deliberative
Sorry,
board. Please keep that.
I apologize. 15-foot walkway, and it's nice that it follows this curve. Now, the only problem is it's entirely off the lot. Okay, the lot line is right here. It's up along the edge of the building. The lot line in this property is the absolute low water mark. So I got another print here. It shows you, this is the low water mark, excuse me, got it upside down so everybody can see. This is the low water mark of 1889. Low water is defined as prior to anything being there. It's a mud flat. This is another picture of the low water mark, historic low water mark. This gentleman is attempting to use the seasonal low water mark on this plan right here. He's attempting to use the seasonal low water mark as the lot line. I would request the board have this developer hire a real surveyor to survey the lot line. This is extremely important. This gentleman over there mentioned that the building is really close to the water. It's 25 feet too close to the water. Okay, 25 feet. I did not make this up. This took a lot of time and effort to put this together, and I would like the board to say, where's the survey of this line? And finally, the lease to the city of Beverly, the ground lease, does not give the applicant any permission to go on Glover's Wharf. Sir, you look at page 2, gives him no permission. So he's got all this. We have to know where the lot line is so that he stays off Glover's Wharf. Glover's Wharf is as much mine as it is yours. So they know this, and this is just pulling things out of the air. So I would ask the board require a survey. It's not too much to ask. It's a $4 million project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Members of the board, the site plan that was submitted to you is based on a survey. Mr. Cameron's company includes both registered engineers and registered land surveyors, and I will let him address that. As to the question with respect to the sort of the legality of the property description and the improvements onto the wharf, the lease and the terms of the RFP did limit the applicant to the areas that we've shown on the plan as the leased premises, and the building is included in the leased premises. The applicant is proposing, as part of this project, as part of the public amenities that are required in connection with this project, to actually make improvements on the city's land for the benefit of the city and the general public. And that work is proposed to be done. That is not, again, that is work that is for the benefit of the city and is something that has been highlighted in the RFP process from the very beginning. Scott.
I have a professional land surveyor that manages my department with over 40 years of experience, registered in Massachusetts, without question. The survey is accurate. The lot line is more or less coincident with Glover's Wharf, and this shows up on record plans going back a long ways. So Glover's Wharf, the edge of the concrete where the concrete railing is approximately the property line. Now, the zoning setbacks and also waterways setbacks that are both looked at in setting and designing this project are measured from that limit. to the property line, which is coincident with the edge of the wharf. So I have no question, no doubt whatsoever that this is accurate and it's spot on. The walkway, I think he was describing, he took his boards with him, but I was thinking he was describing through here. Now, the boardwalk, the walkway is existing along the waterfront. It's already there on the property in 20 feet. And what we are doing is we are adding a new 10-foot walkway. This is going to replace one that is currently on the marina property. That's part of the agreement. We're extending that 10-foot wide all the way down. The bike racks, by the way, are right here. There's an existing pathway from Cabot Street. There's a set of stairs that come down and bring it towards the harbor master. And again, we're proposing another connection to bring that back in to the site, and then another 10-foot wide walkway coming down through this area. So we feel we have met the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The city engineer has also reviewed this, had no questions about the survey, and this has been in front of a lot of eyes. We're 100% confident with the survey. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pete Wilworth, 10 Foster Terrace. And I have good news for the board. I think that shortly you'll realize that you won't have to deal with this problem of this lease because it's patently illegal. This is a copy of the letter that 8 copies there that was delivered to the city council yesterday from McGregor and Legere in Boston. And it illustrates the fact that this property is subject to a deed restriction. And it says right on the deed that the property is bought for park and recreation purposes. And also the city acquired the property with $480-something thousand from an urban self-help grant, which tied the property into restrictions under Article 97 of the state constitutional amendments. And if you read the letter, I think the most important part of it, I mean, the upshot of it is at the end, it says the proposed development and use of the property are illegal under Article 97. The lease, which is a transfer of property between the City of Beverly and Beverly Restaurant Associates, LLC, is illegal under Article 97, and the city should immediately repudiate the lease. So what we have here is a property that was bought in 1996, and the city obviously intended to use the property for park and recreation purposes, and that use has been hijacked for a commercial restaurant. And it will be shown to be illegal if it goes to court. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gooding, I'm assuming you haven't seen this yet and therefore are not ready to comment on it?
I am ready to comment. We anticipated that this would be brought up this evening. The Article 97 issue is one that the city has spent a good amount of time over the past decade bumping up against. The fact of the matter is that the property was purchased, as this gentleman said, with funds from the state, and the grant application for those funds specified that the property would be used for a restaurant. This property has been approved for restaurant use by the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs in connection with the Black Cow Project. It was approved by MEPA and Chapter 91. This issue has not come up. It has been raised periodically by members of the public while we have undertaken to permit the property, but the fact of the matter is this property was acquired for the very use that is before you this evening. Thank you. You're welcome. And I would add, furthermore, that while we obviously appreciate the public's work on this and the sentiment, that regardless of whether this holds true or not, it is outside this board's jurisdiction and should not bear on the decision.
Mr. Clausen, did you wish to comment?
Just to add a short follow-up to the comments that Ms. Gooding put forward, the city did also negotiate a second project agreement once the Black Cow project was nullified. And so I think you have in your packet that project agreement that was signed between the mayor and the Secretary of Executive Office of Environmental Affairs that oversees the urban self-help grant that was given to the city. And just agree that, yes, a restaurant was always considered a part of that grant, part of the use of the site, and the project agreement specifically says that.
Pupil Rick Marciano, 141 McKay Street. I have a deed here. Pass that down in the back, you see the map. But it's over $1.6 million. It shows that we basically paid for the state. That's the pier that we bought the pier years prior. The pier was specifically made for the public, from what I understand, because when we put the bridge, built the bridge, we needed someplace to fish. I used to fish off that bridge when I was younger. So that's one thing that's been left out of here completely in reference to the parking. That pier was put there so we could all enjoy it. We're going to lose our parking spaces. I see mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandfathers, everybody uses that pier. They go out and fish, and they just enjoy themselves. It's the greatest thing they can do, you know, in the city, right next to the ocean. The parking that they use is going to be undermined because of this. A lot of them go in the evening. Some of them, this is how they survive in reference to getting food when they catch something, the squid. I don't know if you've seen them catch those before. It's pretty interesting watching them pull those up. But that's food for the citizens, and that's this specific area where the McDonald's is. As you can see, it's for park and recreation purposes. Where is the park? It's disappearing right now, is what I can see. One of the questions I have for the Harbor Fest that we have annually for the past, I'd say, 7 years, where are they going to have the Harvest Fest now when this gets built? That's just... No one, I don't think anyone's thought of that yet. That it just that's part of, that's the citizens' property. That's for all of us to use. Right now, this, unfortunately, with this restaurant, it's going to take away a lot of what we have right now. It's not the citizens' fault that the McDonald's building's in disrepair. That's the city that's done that. We elect the officials to go there and keep the city up. You know, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, it's an eyesore, but that's not our fault. That should have been park and recreations. I've talked years ago. We could have put kayaks in there, you know, rented those out. There's a small place by the pier that one of my relatives used to rent the rowboats out. I don't know if anyone's been here long enough in Beverly. He had little motorboats also down there. He used to rent it for $1 a year. It's a lot of history down there. But the priority for me is to have a nice park there for the citizens. If the city wants to make money, you've seen these food trucks. We can lease a few spaces out there for a few $1,000s a year where they can just park there and they can sell whatever food they want to the citizens if the city's looking for a way to make money. But again, that is specifically there for the citizens to enjoy. The parking is going to be undermined, and sometimes you say you got a 5-pound bag area, and we're trying to stuff 10 pounds into that area. But what this is, you have a 5-pound area, and you're trying to stuff 20 pounds into that area. And it just is. And the other thing I disagree with, in our city of Beverly, we have some great, great restaurants throughout our city. And I believe in competition. But when you take a city piece of property and you throw a restaurant on a city piece of property, the public property, to compete with all those other great restaurants we have in the city, that's not right. It should be a private piece of land where a restaurant goes on, other than the food, the food trucks I talked about earlier. But I see that's part of, that's not within your realm to vote on that, but that's just something to think about. We're gonna lose some restaurants because of that. And traffic's, like I said, they've already talked about that too much. Thank you very much.
Are there other members of the public who wish to speak? Mr. Mayor? I think that if there's no one else in the public who wishes to speak, and if the board... Okay.
Sue Shasha, 12 Cost Court. This is just a follow-up to what... Can you hold the microphone down so I'm sorry, I'm short. Sue Shasha, 12 Cox Court. This is just a follow-up to what the last gentleman had to say. The harbor is for the citizens, and the way I see it, the restaurant, the first floor, is a money-making floor. To bring a family down there, you have to spend money almost to enjoy the harbor. The snack bar, you have to pay. The retail space, you have to pay. The bar selling alcohol, you have to pay. You can go to the bathroom for free, unless it's going to be coin operated. The tables and chairs, they'll be free if you can sit there, because the people from the snack bar will be sitting there. So where is it that a family can go and enjoy the harbor, just to enjoy the harbor? There won't be any space to do that, because this restaurant, almost everything there, you have to pay for use. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
If I may just address that last comment, I would like to make clear, because I think there was some confusion, even though we are not showing it on the plans, Ferryway Landing, the park that's adjacent to this site, will remain after this project. In fact, it will be improved and integrated into the entire site in a way that I think will enhance its enjoyment and hopefully use for things like Harborfest and lots of other good things. I just thought it was important to clarify that. If the board is contemplating closing the public hearing, I would first ask, I believe that our application addresses the special permit criteria, and we've certainly supplemented that to a large degree this evening. So unless the board wanted to hear additional information, I'd be happy resting on the application itself. I am aware that we have a couple of absences tonight, and we need 6 of 9 votes if the board was inclined to vote. And knowing how important this is, I would just like to be sure that nobody needs any additional information before closing the public hearing and/or preparing to vote.
Thank you. Let's throw it out to the public just once more. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Ma'am?
I wasn't prepared to speak, so it's not going to be very eloquent, but...
I'm sorry, your name and your address,
I'm sorry,
please?
Jessica Berger from 36 Front Street. I don't believe all this stuff about no parking problems is true at all. I can see what's going to be happening in the future, but if everyone is so sure that it won't cause parking problems in the other areas, the residential areas, can we be promised to get residential parking stickers for our neighborhood? Would that be backed up, in other words, if you're so sure that you won't need to have people parking on our streets? That's all.
Thank you. Can we take a 5-minute break? We've been sitting for 3 hours and... I just would like to take a 5-minute break if we could.
I think we go to recess and then go to reopen.
Yeah. Can I get a second on that? All in favor? Okay, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Can I get a motion to return to the public hearing? So moved. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, we're back for the continued public hearing. Having had a few minutes to think about this, stretch our legs and all that, my inclination is that this is a really critical project. It's a critical project, clearly for the applicant, but it's a really critical project for the city. I would like to see the full membership of the board have an opportunity to make the decision on this. So my inclination would be to leave the public hearing open so that when Ned and Zane return, should they have questions based upon, I presume they'll have the opportunity and they will review tonight's tape of the meeting, and if they have questions or concerns, that they could ask the applicant those questions. So my inclination, frankly, and it's open for discussion, but my inclination would be to continue the public hearing to the 19th, to give Zane and Ned the opportunity to ask questions. If anything crops up with the rest of us in that intervening time period, we would give the public, again, anybody who may not have been able to be here tonight but can be here on the 19th, an opportunity to speak, with the idea that hopefully if everybody is satisfied with presentations and information, that we could close the public hearing on the 19th and render a decision that night. That's my inclination, and I'm open to hear what other members of the board think.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I concur on it. Okay, that being said, how about formalizing it? I'm sorry, before we do that, Ms. Gooding, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, and we are in agreement with the continuance. I know that the board's schedule is difficult and challenging, and there are a lot of big projects in the mix. I appreciate that. I do want to emphasize that timing is becoming increasingly important on this project. This is only the beginning step for this project. We also need to go through the state approvals. So I am very hopeful, and I promised Mr. Bloom that I would be trying very hard to get to a decision tonight. I did not anticipate that we would not have a full slate of board members. But I would please ask that members read the record and hope that we can get to a decision, if not by the 19th. And I assume there's no availability on the 13th meeting?
Sarah won't be here. Yeah.
Okay.
Part of the reason why.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, Wayne had
Just a couple of questions that were fresh in our minds, I guess. There was a question about residential parking possibility, and a question about parking for people who now use public parking for the park access.
Sure.
And could you address those
could.
questions?
So first of all, it's important to emphasize, I realize we didn't do that during this meeting. I think we did during the first meeting. All of the spaces at the site, 1 Water Street as well as 11 Water Street, and the Creamery are all public parking spaces and will continue to be that way. So while the restaurant is depending on those public parking spaces, it is shared public parking together with users of the pier and the marinas. And with respect to the resident parking, obviously this is something more for the city to address, but having heard Mr. Clausen address a similar question in parking and traffic, my understanding is that the city has now implemented on a trial basis some resident parking. They know how to make that system work. They don't particularly want to do that, but the basis for implementing it is in place should it prove necessary. The hope and expectation is that it will not. But it's there. The city has used it elsewhere in Ward 2.
Thank you. I think all of us regret that we have to delay this, but 2 of our members are missing. Sorry about that.
No,
I
appreciate that. One thing I would ask, and this is something you prompted me to ask, is there anything that we haven't addressed that members need to have addressed at the next meeting to help them make this decision.
I would like to hear, I know the mayor would like to make some comments. I don't know when that will happen. Do you know? If it would be next time or this time? Or?
It's up to the mayor.
Thank you for calling me to the microphone, Mr. Miller. Mike Cahill, 28 Foster Drive. I would very much like to share some thoughts with the full board. So that's my preference is to wait until is it the 19th now that you're going to? So I fully expect to be here and to share some thoughts at that time. Okay, thank you all.
I was just speaking for myself. I think your presentations have been very thorough. You've addressed all of at least my questions. So in response to your question, for me personally, I don't think there's any additional information.
Same.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you.
So we'll just wait for Mr. Barrett and Mr. Kraft to come back, and we'll have a full board.
Very good.
So that being said, can we have a motion to, all right, so we've had the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. This matter is continued to our November 19th meeting. Wow. It'll be Thanksgiving. Thank you, everyone.
We're doing a master plan. Just kidding. Yeah, I know. As you all know, I'm sure have heard, we're doing neighborhood meetings. We have 2 more, one tomorrow night because you haven't had enough meetings this week, and one on the 29th. The tomorrow night is at Cove Community Center. The 29th is at Centerville Elementary School. We encourage anyone who hasn't been to come to a meeting. What?
Folks, please take your conversations out into the hallway, please.
Okay. Okay. Great. We also have, I encourage you to bring friends. We also have a, what? Yes, I suppose. We also have the survey, another survey available online through the Plan Beverly website, and similar to the activity that we're doing at the meeting, though I encourage people to go to the meeting to get more context for the exercise, but it is up there, and it's a interactive mapping discussion board kind of thing, so you can provide feedback and look at what other people have commented in a geographic way on specific locations throughout the city. So that will be open until November 4th. We're beginning to get existing conditions chapters to look through, and the consultant is kind of moving forward with that, and also at the same time starting to run through scenarios and think about how they will formulate recommendations with us and with the committee. There will be another public meeting on December 5th for the master plan. We are also trying to schedule a public meeting, because I said you don't have enough meetings to go to, for the mobility hub study that we were doing on either November 20th or 21st. So I will share those dates with you when they're finalized and locations, but that is the update from the master plan and mobility hub perspective.
I just want to add that I went to the meeting for Ward 3, and it was, I just thought it was a really great meeting to look at the entire city and think about where we want or might want various development or open space or all of that kind of thing from a citywide perspective. It was a very good exercise, a wonderful exchange of ideas and thoughts. I just thought it was a really great meeting, and I tip my hat to the staff and to the master plan committee, because it was really well done, well run, and very informative.
Yeah, and they're more conversational, not,
Yeah.
we're not talking to people.
They're interactive. Anything else?
I would just add with BevCam on that, I mean, I hope more people will take advantage of these. I mean, I think for the public, the kind of access that we had to be able to sit at a table with the planning department and the mayor and school committee members and all, and just talk about, I think this should go here and this should go there. It's just a huge opportunity that comes to citizens very few times. So, I mean, I just really hope people will take advantage of these opportunities. They're hugely valuable.
Anybody else for anything? Oh, one last thing, I just want to say thank you to all of you. We've had an incredibly busy work schedule here, and the hours have been long, and the work's been difficult, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate all of you and all of your homework that you're doing and all of the input that you're providing as we vote on these incredibly important projects for the city. So thank you all very, very much. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.